Hey, it's Soul, and I want to open up a series of discussions that seek to identify areas that the World of Warcraft can improve on. This is going to be very video blog-like, by the way, so feel free to tab over to something else while you listen. Throughout this series, I'm going to come at the World of Warcraft from a different angle that doesn't exactly involve what I would call the big three, raiding, dungeons, and PvP at a very high level. So what the hell does that mean? You're wondering, right? Like, does that mean that I'm going to cater to the so-called casuals? Does that mean I'm going to say, yes, we're going to give mythic gear for doing raid finder stuff? No, that's not even close to what I'm trying to do. You'll see what I mean as I return to this subject time and time again. So I hope that you'll walk with me on this journey by subscribing to the channel. So in this first and hopefully not last video on this very broad subject, I want to talk specifically about achievements and mounts and our pets and our toys and our transmog. Collections is the best word to lump all this stuff together. It's the not so hidden fourth endgame of the World of Warcraft, which sits alongside raiding and PvP and dungeon stuffs, but it's not often given the attention that it needs, especially because one, it doesn't translate into a competitive activity, which is very popular, and two, the loudest outcry that we hear when it comes to collection is more. We want more. More meaningful conversations on subjects like this, they often get buried under what the current Mythic Plus meta is, and frankly, this video isn't likely to take off, let alone this series. But collections are what ties the World of Warcraft together, and it includes WoW's entire audience, from the bleeding casual to the bleeding edge. Whether you're camping for a time-lost proto-drake, or scoring that gladiator title, or a keystone master, collections offer a way to celebrate your accomplishments well past that exciting moment of victory, or when that thing finally freaking drops. Over the years, we've seen that power fades and stats squish, but transmog, well, that's forever. And collections in WoW are in trouble because it's a growing system with no consideration for an outlet. There's nowhere for it to go. So why is this important? This may come off as an empty platitude, but I strongly believe that there's got to be a deeper sense of roleplay and immersion in the World of Warcraft that is mostly missing. Many of us see that differently, so I'll try to be specific. I get that there's a very loud outcry for a different sort of roleplay, more agency on how we customize our characters, as in, talent and stats and our rotations and bonuses and such things. No doubt, that gives identity to our characters and classes feel, at least in combat. I believe that there's a feeling that comes with how our characters interact with the world outside of combat. Blizzard has been neglecting that to a great degree, and even now in Shadowlands. The sense of collection in the World of Warcraft has been around since the moment you could put on gear that looked different from the previous piece that you were wearing, and in those days bag space was all the organization there was. Multiple mounts and pets and appearances sat in your inventory or your bank, and it wasn't until years later when mounts transitioned to a UI system for a very practical reason: we just were running out of space. Later, it happened for transmog, so we wouldn't have to hold multiples of our favorite sets in our banks or void storages forever. And by the Warlords and Legion expansions, the collections window as we know it today fully formed, housing the thousands of pets and achievements and appearances and mounts and toys that we've collected over the years. Without this tab, we would be crushed under the weight of these items. We'd be begging Blizzard, please give us a 400 slot mount bag, that for some, it still wouldn't be big enough. So to that, I'm very grateful for this quality of life change. The Collections tab truly unleashed this fourth pillar of endgame content, partially because inventory space no longer constrained players from wanting to do those farms, and mostly because the more that you collect, the more options you have to express your character's personality. This sense of freedom of expression is enjoyed primarily by you, obviously you're the one who's doing it, as well as those around you who, take the time to appreciate those people standing around town and queuing up for content and just trying to look good while doing it. How many times have you whispered someone, or someone has whispered you to compliment your look, or your pet, or your title, or your mount? How many of us celebrated when we got those tusks of Manaroth or that sexy bikini outfit? And how many of us are still plugging away trying to obtain them? However, the Collections tab brought what is, in my opinion, a secondary shift in both player behavior and reward design. For example, according to the Wowhead database, 60 mounts were added over the course of the Cataclysm expansion. In Legion, 124 were added, and in Battle for Azeroth, 158. Shadowlands is currently at 80 some odd mounts, with more to come, I'm sure. Similar treatment has been given to pets and toys, and the transmog database is, of course, ever growing. This is by no means an argument over the quality versus quantity of our collections, but the meaning of collections themselves. Now, I'm all in for having more stuff, more options to express my character, and to just satisfy a growing collection, of course. Here's my character in all of his glory. He has a snazzy and exclusive title, he's got a mount that you probably don't have, and a pet that you probably do. I could always switch my transmog profile, I can change my title, hop onto a different mount, and swap my pet. But the agency that I have at expressing my character is pretty much limited to this, my person. I can't layer on more and more clothes, or ride 3 mounts at once, and while I might turn the heads of a few players, what about the in-game world? Can't the endgame of collection go beyond just getting 100% in that all the things add-on? My critique in today's WoW is that I have so many extras and options I've collected, but the way that I show them off has stayed the same, with very few exceptions. The Warlords of Draenor garrison is one of the very few, and obviously the biggest example of what I would consider a slice of the World of Warcraft that we as players own. There are many restrictions, but for the sake of argument, I can tailor it to my preference. My garrison has a level 2 menagerie, meaning 10 of my favorite pets will walk around the garrison. My stable lets me display my favorite mounts, and while the rest of the stuff is more garrison specific, I can choose what buildings to have and where they go, and who are the followers that skulk about the area. The flight deck in Dalaran above the Broken Isles will select a favorite mount whenever I use the hub's flight master to go wherever I want to go. And in my order hall completed sets, to which I have none from the old days, they'll display on armor dummies. Your achievements in archaeology are given a visual display in select parts of the world, including your garrison and Dalaran, as well as your faction's main city in Kultiris or Zandalar. A very small number of NPCs are aware of your specific exploits, such as Lady Vaj, who remembers that you offed her many moons ago. This is something that's much too scarce in the World of Warcraft, the influence that our achievements and accolades have on the world. Even if it's an obvious facade, it's like my character is a bubble, and this is the limit of my immersion. To be fair, the world itself undergoes big shifts at the end of a big story chapter like Legion or in Battle for Azeroth, and NPCs have their new dialogue options. Woo, that's cool! But it's also a shared experience that's not entirely about you. Shadowlands does deserve some credit to give an impact on your efforts and decisions, seeing as how restoring your Covenant Sanctum influences what you do in your home zone and how you go about doing it. There's so much more that could be done though. Now this is my opinion entirely, but this lack of immersion does a lot to hurt WoW players who don't really participate much in the big three. I suspect that it's a huge audience that doesn't look at videos about which class they should play or what spec is the current meta in dungeons or raids or whatever, but more so, how do you complete this one quest? Or how do you collect this pet, or mount, or appearance? So what can we suggest to add some gameplay layers and increase immersion based on just collecting stuff? Because the subject is on immersion, and I feel that the best approach on that is with some subtlety. Nothing that's ham-fisted, or even worse, feels required, because Shadowlands did itself both right and wrong with this anima currency. They did it right because it's attached to what is an entirely optional game experience. And I'm going to argue that it's wrong because it's earned from all sorts of activities, including the big three. Doing so turned anima into a feature that's kind of to be min-maxed before the expansion ends, and anima income really dries up. It's going to suck having to go back. I feel strongly that anima and the sanctum would have been received much better if it was only obtained through world content, and of course, at a higher rate with respect to nerfing all the other sources. That, I think, would make the transition from expansion feature to evergreen reward system that much smoother. So here's the part of the video where I fix my hair, and where you still might be on board with some of the sentiments, but I'll probably lose you when I get to ideas and examples. But as you're listening, you might come up with an awesome idea yourself, and I would love to hear about it in the comments. So let's start light. It would be really awesome if in our travels there would be select NPCs who recall our different exploits thanks to the titles that we've earned. So here's a simple one, like if you walked up to the bank NPC in Oribos, it would acknowledge that you have the Spire Stalker title, the one for climbing a lot of Torghast. It would say something like, "Ooh, in all my eons of existence, I've never heard of a mortal climbing the Jailer's Tower." That sounds sexual, but you know what I mean. So how about if you have over 20,000 achievement points? What do we get for that? Let's say in your capital city, a random kid tries to run up to you. They start following you around, trying to get your attention, basically. It happens every now and then, maybe has a cooldown of 2 days or something. So you talk to them and they're like, hey, they just want to say like, hey, miss or mister, thanks for everything that you've done. And they want to give you a flower or something for you to accept. Or you don't have to accept it. You could just tell them to beat it because you're a badass and flowers are for flower people. Bring me a badass. Well, what am I talking about? But here's another small one, though. If you have Lore Master from a specific era, a few of those old quest givers that you interacted with once upon a time, if you walk by them, they'll give you a quick acknowledgement. They'll be like, hey, that's such and such. They did a lot to help us out. And some people around them will be like, oh, yeah, well, that's cool. Yeah, well, good for them. Now let's get into this a little bit more. Let's get into something a little bit less subtle. So how about outside of taverns, or right next to flight points, there would be a hitching post where some random mounts, favored or not, they just show up. So let's say there will be 2 mounts, one flying and one ground mount that are just hanging out there, and they're ones that you already own. Now sure, you can just press a hotkey and mount up yourself and take off, so let's turn this hitching post into a small perk. Clicking on the mounts on the hitching post will instantly put you on the mount, whoop-de-doo, but you're also given a 20% mount speed buff that'll go away when you dismount, and maybe you'll get a 10% buff for flying mounts. Well, maybe now that I think about it, that 10% speed, maybe that should expire after 30 seconds or a minute or so because, well, you could just go wherever you want, basically. But anyway, the hitching post isn't going to be an unlock, it's just going to be there in most places where it makes the most sense. It's not an upgrade, or, it's not something you gotta work for or rep for or whatever. It's just a nice little quality of life thing to add. Now here's a fun optional thing. Let's have Johnny Osman, remember that guy? Let's have Johnny Osman appear in random areas, random towns, friendly places. It doesn't matter what expansion, he just pops up somewhere with a daily or a weekly quest. He's trying to impress people in the area, and it's your job to show him up. So think of it like the Trial of Style, but against an NPC. And from it, you get one of those Trial of Style tokens, or just random gold and reputation, depending on where he appears. Now, those are quick things, but how about something a bit more bold? How about in a bunch of towns, or hubs, or even capital cities, there are special quests where normal folks, they just come up to you, or they're standing around and they need your help. So let's use the Crossroads, for example. In the Crossroads or Lakeshire, they might be in desperate need of weapons and armor, and they're willing to take whatever we can spare. So we walk over, we talk to them, and they're like, oh, we need swords. What swords do you have? Okay. The quest will have us select a few swords from our collection, not our inventory, but our collection, and we'll loan it to them, and then suddenly all these NPC guards around town will wear those swords. And as a thank you for letting them borrow our stuff for a while, they'll give us like 5 gold a week for a month. I don't know. It's a pittance, but it's something. Like, it would be a bit much if we had to go back every week to re-loan out the gear or do like some repair quest or something like that. It's much too complicated. We're just looking for a little bit of flavor and interaction with the world that we left behind. But now let's doll it up a little bit more. Helping these people out will get you a kind of militia reputation that when it gets higher and higher, you can then start arming more of the guards with both weapons and armor and helmets and shoulders and stuff. That's kind of the idea. And when you max it out, they'll give you a transmog set because, hey, they finally got around to making their own armor design and they want to thank you for the help that you've given them over this whole rep building period. As for how long it takes, doesn't matter. It can be like a month, a year, an expansion, whatever. It would be cool if we can do that for a bunch of places throughout Azeroth and then some. Simple armor sets from those, from that style and era, just new stuff. It'd be pretty cool. And the quests themselves, it'd have to make sense, right? Like, helping Shattrath City would mean pulling from our Burning Crusade collections, and arming Warspear comes from Warlords of Draenor collections, and so on. And each week we'll get a lump sum from all these places that we're helping out. It would only be like, a couple hundred gold at most, but it would be super cool to visit Warspear and see all these guards kitted in the Garrison plate set, or all the Draenei and Shattrath wearing tier 5, or actually I think they already are, but something else. Or even better, in the Vindikar, a few of the Lightforged Draenei, they can wear the World Defiler set from Argus, and they'll be like, oh, hey, champion, thanks, I think. I'll never forget your kindness. And what's more, Blizzard can add more to this whenever they want. Like, hey, Lakeshire has a new set for you that you can help make, or maybe they added this militia feature to the Court of Ferondis in Azuna, and now you can obtain this spectral armor that's kind of see-through. but I think you get it. Without getting into player housing, and spoiler alert, I don't even have to in this video, I think the Order Hall would be the most relevant place to update for the sake of doing some really cool stuff with our collections. We could have a room that's like the Order Hall Armory, where you would see a bunch of paper dolls lined up just waiting to be filled out. It would work similarly to the statues in the Warlord's Garrison. Like, you can click, you choose a selection, in this case, you choose from completed gear sets, and then ta-da, just to show off. Line up a bunch of your favorite completed sets, or maybe over on the walls you can present some of your favorite weapons. And maybe somewhere else there can be like all your class mounts from Legion, and maybe some others that you can choose yourself. Since we're on Shadowlands at the moment with all these different Covenant armor sets, it'd be kind of cool. Kind of the same thing. Let's have the completed Covenant sets be displayed in an armory somewhere, and with just a click, you just walk right up and boop, your entire transmog changes to that set without any additional charge. It's a little immersive things that acknowledge your efforts beyond a UI or an add-on. But here's what could be really neat going with the whole completed tier sets on the dummy. Let's say you still have incomplete sets, right? As long as you have at least half, maybe 2/3 of a set, you can put this incomplete set on these armor racks, and an NPC will take notice and they'll offer to help you out. Maybe they have some stuff that they can give us. So they'll give us a weekly quest. So it's not like you can work on multiple incomplete sets simultaneously. You can only get one of these pieces per week. And what they'll do, they'll ask you for a crazy amount of materials from that expansion's era. So, let's go with vanilla and you want like, a tier 3 set. You're only missing 2 pieces. So you put this armor set on the rack, and then you get this quest. You're supposed to get a bunch of materials from like Molten Core and AQ and other such places, and a bunch of crafting materials, but turning all that stuff in will give you one random transmog from that set that you don't already have. What would people think about that? So more small interactions throughout the world, and maybe a few fun distractions outside of the big 3, raids, PvP, dungeons. That's the satisfaction that I'm trying to look for here, because we've seen so much to celebrate and to support competition in the World of Warcraft, which from my observation does it more than any other MMO. That's why some of you might be reaching this part of the video reacting like, I don't get this at all. This doesn't add anything to WoW, guys. But this is just a tiny part of what I want to see more of, what caters to both relaxed and more competitive content, and there are plenty more videos to come. I'm sure you folks sitting there have tons of doubts and reasons why this can't or shouldn't be worked on, but I'm consciously looking past the challenge and the work to be done and the opportunity cost of one feature versus another, and instead I'm just focusing on the what if, just the coolness factor. The WoW developers have said numerous times that one of Warcraft's most important and central characters is the world itself. Azeroth is supposed to be a living and breathing world, right? It doesn't entirely have to be thanks to the players that are phased together by the invisible hand. Some cool ideas are out there to make the world feel more alive and interactive, and I hope to share more with you if you let me. Thanks for watching and listening. Like and share this video to help encourage more discussion. Subscribe for more videos like these on all things Warcraft, and we're done. At least for now, I hope. Until next time, stay safe, stay healthy, and stay breezy.